So good morning, everybody. Welcome to chapter 15. Chapter 15 is kind of a long chapter. It goes over a few different things. I'm not sure if I agree with the way they organize the chapter. So first thing in this chapter, they go over is how the life started on Earth. So they have a couple theories for that, which can be its own entire chapter. Then they start going into bacteria. So they go over what bacteria is and then what archaea is. That can be a different chapter. Then they start going into protista, that's another group, and then fungus. So they have 5 different things going on in this chapter. Maybe they were trying to save some space in the textbook, but it's a lot that's in this chapter. It's not very detailed, so we're gonna spend some time on each of these topics. We will not be able to finish this chapter today because it's kind of a long chapter, but let's get started with it. And the first thing we're gonna go over is how life started on Earth. So life came around about, it's an estimate, 4 billion years ago. So what we're trying to do in this chapter is, there was Big Bang, and that created lots of suns and stars and supernovas, and Earth is product of one of those supernovas. So it was really hot in the beginning. Then it started to cool down. The way it cooled down, comets and meteorites that were made of ice or water, they started coming down on Earth. That's how water came on Earth, and it started to cool down. So in this chapter, we're trying to go over how life started on Earth. And in last chapter, I mentioned the oldest fossil we have is stromatolite, and we can date it back to about 3.6 billion years ago. So in this time, the Earth was still sterile. It was a hospitable environment, and it was still cooling down. And then we found the first cells around this time. Those were simple cells, single cell organisms. Then over time, those single cell organisms got more complex. So that started happening. And then those complex organisms turned into prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and then into fungus, animals, and plants on land. So it started with a single cell, and over time, it got more and more complex. So that's what we're going to kind of go over. So it's difficult to pinpoint exactly when the life began on Earth. So they are basing that on the first fossil they found, which was stromatolite. So the evidence that we have is about 4 billion years ago. So that's what they can date it back to. So if on the exam, I ask you a question, when the life on Earth might have started, and you can give me an estimate of around 4 billion years. First cells, they were prokaryotes, because prokaryotes are a lot simple compared to eukaryotes. And then eukaryotes came from prokaryotes. So over time, these prokaryotic cells, they got more complex, and some of these cells became eukaryotic cells. So it's more complex for eukaryotes. Do you guys know if there was any oxygen on early Earth?
No oxygen?
No oxygen.
Except carbon.
Yeah, so it was carbon, hydrogen, water, methane, nitrogen, maybe. So that's what was there on early Earth. Let me kind of show you what early Earth looked like. So maybe like this, there were volcanoes, there was lightning, some water, but no oxygen. You don't see any plants. That's where the oxygen is coming from. So there was no oxygen. There were these inorganic molecules. So inorganic molecules. And then over time, these inorganic molecules turned into organic molecules like lipids, monosaccharides, nucleotides, and amino acids. And then they started joining together We're going to talk about how that happened. And they turned into longer chains, such as polysaccharides, RNA that converted into DNA, and then polypeptide chains. So we had only inorganic molecules. Over time, um, they turned into organic molecules and then into a little bit more complex organic molecules. So monomers, they started joining together to form polymers. So genetic material that encodes for proteins that came around, and then we had proteins, and then there was something that was made up of phospholipids. So phospholipids, if you have maybe, a bottle of water and you drop some oil in it, and then you start shaking the bottle, that oil droplets, they're gonna start to come together. So that's how the lipids formed. So lipids kind of came together, and once you had this lipid spheres, it creates a different environment on the inside versus the outside. So there's different environment here compared to here. Once you have the environment separated, now inside can be genetic material, um, other proteins, and it got more complicated over time. But this is what the first cell looked like. First cell is known as a protocell. It had this self-replicating system. It had some proteins and some genetic material inside, enclosed in a phospholipid membrane. So it was very simple, just a phospholipid membrane, some proteins, and some genetic material, the DNA or RNA, one of those. So that's the first cell. Now, how do we know? How do we know that these inorganic molecules turned into organic molecules over time? So they have an experiment that supports that, and that's called Miller's experiment. This is another name I need you guys to know. There will be maybe 2 or 3 questions on the exam that will talk about this experiment. This is called Miller's experiment. Um, so Miller's experiment, so let me show you who this person was. So his name is Stanley Miller. So make sure you know the name, Stanley Miller. So this is a person, he's standing next to his famous experiment, Miller's experiment. So he was a grad student, and he was, so grad student, someone who's working on their doctorate or their master's degree. And he was just procrastinating. He wasn't really doing anything, working on his research. He was just, thinking, daydreaming, sitting there, how the life on early Earth might have, came about. So he set up an experiment. It wasn't even his field, so he was just thinking about random stuff, and then he tried setting up an experiment according to that. So I showed you a picture of early Earth. This is what it looked like. There were volcanoes, there was hot water, boiling water, and lightning. So this is what early Earth looked like. So what he did, he created this experiment. He got some water that might have came on Earth from the meteorites or the comets or the ice comets, and then he put some. He started it to boil it with a flask. So that's kind of showing volcano there. So volcanoes, they created hot environment on Earth. Then to get the lightning effect, he put in some electrodes. So that gave him the lightning effect. And then he put in inorganic molecules, and then he let it run. He let it run for a long, long time. And after that, he noticed that those inorganic molecules turned into organic molecules. So that's the experiment that they have that supports this theory that early Earth had inorganic molecules and they turned into organic molecules over time. So inorganic molecules are able to turn into organic molecules over time. Later they did, now they have more research from NASA that supports that these inorganic molecules and even some organic molecules are found on these meteorites and on these comets outside of Earth. So that's also where these might have came from, these inorganic molecules. So they have more data to support that now. But this is the famous experiment that simulated early Earth's environment, and simple molecules combined into organic compounds such as amino acids. So they turned into amino acids, then into proteins, and that's how the cells came around. So make sure you write this down, Miller's experiment. Another thing I want to mention, this experiment did not create life. It just showed that humans don't even need to be around in order to turn these inorganic molecules into organic molecules. So this did not create life. It just showed how the life came around, turning from inorganic molecules to organic molecules. And then the second thing that needed to happen was the genetics. So if you go to maybe Yellowstone, they have this clay surface there. So in this clay, if some of the nucleotides, this is showing A's. So if you guys remember when we talked about RNA and DNA, there was adenine, guanine, cytosine, uracil for RNA, and thymine for DNA. So RNA is more simple compared to DNA. So RNA came around first. So that's why this is showing a uracil. So if these nucleotides get stuck on a clay surface and in the same area, maybe it has uracils that are around there, it's going to be able to link. So if you have these A's that are held in this clay and there's U's that are found nearby, these are going to attract those U's and they're going to link together. So that's how the genetics might have happened in early Earth. So clay and iron pyrite might have catalyzed the first synthesis reactions where the nucleotides were able to link together with the use of clay. And then once that started happening, it became a self-replicating molecule like RNA, and that's why we said RNA came around first because it's simpler. And then over time, adaptations happened, natural selection happened, and it turned into DNA, which is more stable. So we have RNA and DNA both, but then most of the cells have DNA because it's more stable. So stable molecules that could self-replicate became more common, like DNA. So that's how the genetics might have happened with the use of clay. So why was the Miller experiment important?